representatives and senators can be kicked out and no longer serve in our government. And it's a crime punishable by death, is what treason is. Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason, and we want her out of our government.
That is an amazing video of Marjorie Greene back from the early days of the big lie. And it's amazing because it includes a couple of important things. One, it's her leading a crowd and getting all fired up at the prospect of Nancy Pelosi being executed for her crimes. And two, it's her speaking incredibly favorably about the idea that those who are treasonous against the United States can and should be removed from office. They should not be allowed to hold elected office. Now, not that long after she gave that speech, she decided to change on that particular position once people were pointing out that she might well be barred from office because she supported the insurrection. Suddenly, that is cancel culture. You can't possibly do that. And as of this week now, a judge seems to agree with her position that she was not sufficiently supportive of the insurrection to bar her from office. The judge ruled earlier today that she is qualified for re-election, the first thing she's ever been qualified for in her life, in fact, despite this lawsuit that Free Speech for People and others have supported. Now, the legal challenge against her says that she violated the 14th Amendment, which says that no one, quote, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. And interestingly, that legal challenge, which a group of activists and lawyers got behind, was also launched in part with the help of Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who said that she is not qualified to seek and hold public office. Remember Raffensperger, because we're gonna return to him near the end of this story. But first, we know that she testified, a lot of evidence was put forward. I don't know if that video in particular was, but her talking favorably about political violence and saying you can't allow a peaceful transfer of power and all that. Unfortunately, it did not convince the judge. And the judge said that there's insufficient evidence to suggest that she engaged in insurrection or rebellion or gave aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. He goes on to say, challengers made a valiant effort to support inferences that Greene was an insurrectionist, but the evidence is lacking and the court is not persuaded. While Greene's public statements and heated rhetoric may well have contributed to the environment that ultimately led to the invasion, expressing constitutionally protected political views, no matter how aberrant they may be, prior to being sworn in as a representative is not engaging in insurrection under the 14th Amendment. And so as of right now, and this process is not done, we'll get to the next step soon, she might well be allowed to run for office again. What do you both think of that?
Well, so that's kind of interesting on a couple of fronts. John, is your read of that administrative judge is saying if she'd done it while after being sworn in, that this might have worked?
I'm not 100% sure because there's a lot of weaseliness in the decision, which I did actually look over. It's available. I think it's like 12 to 14 pages. You can look over the whole thing if you want. It avoids the question entirely of whether this was an insurrection. And it specifically says, because we've already decided that she wasn't an active participant in it, we don't even need to consider whether it was a real insurrection. So the entire thing felt to me as being very careful and trying not to say too much, just implying that there certainly is that she had not yet been sworn in at that point, but then also that they don't have any like proven evidence that she directly like gave tours. She said at one point, I would have to talk to people in my campaign, but I don't think we did. And you saw her, she denied knowing any of this stuff, even when it was presented to her. So the entire thing felt sort of careful and weaselly. It's hard to say.
Yeah, so now getting to the substance of it, Cori Bush introduced a bill on January 6th, which Nancy Pelosi had originally fought, didn't want her to introduce. That says something to the effect of all the Republicans who say this election is not legitimate should not be seated because they are declaring their own elections illegitimate. So we'll take their word for it because I mean, if you win an election, then you say, oh, this election had fraud, I cheated. Or not I cheated, but somebody cheated. Well, okay, then I guess we shouldn't count it and we'll have re-election for just those people. Everybody else verifies the vote, no problem. They actually counted it, etc. They should have actually passed that bill. The Democrats could have passed that bill, but of course they didn't because they never do anything, right? That was a progressive trying to do the right thing. That was an opportunity to say to the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, well, if you think the election is fraudulent, okay, then go home. and we'll make sure we do it right next time, okay? But they didn't do that. As usual, Democrats took no action at all, and here we are. And now she gets to say, well, I wasn't sworn in, okay? And that, to be fair, that provision is very specific about people who were members of Congress, okay? So she could win on those grounds. Now, it's not over. We'll get back to Raffensperger. But one more thing. I think the most important part of this story is, it's driving me crazy. We've created another alternate reality. The people who did the riot and broke into the Capitol were never going to hold the building. They were never going to be like, oh, okay, now we have defeated the American military and we are in charge. And the new president is that QAnon shaman guy, okay? The real insurrection was Trump, John Eastman, his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ginny Thomas, who all talked about using martial law, ending democracy, putting in fake electors in the states where Trump didn't win. That's an actual coup that could have worked. So when they why were they chanting hang Mike Pence? Not any Democrat, but a Republican, the Republican vice president. They were chanting hang Mike Pence as they went into the building. Because if Mike Pence had gone along with the fraud and said, I am, even though the role is ceremonial, it doesn't matter, that's how a coup works. You don't care what the law is, you take charge both with force and military, but also with propaganda. So if Mike Pence had said, the real electors, I'm not counting them. I will take the fake electors that Bannon and Navarro put together and I'm putting them in, and Trump is declaring martial law, as Marjorie Taylor Greene wanted him to do, or considered doing, okay, then it would have worked. That would have been a coup. And it would have been executed, and there was nothing we could have done about it. And then we would have to try to fight the government, and then et cetera, right? And so, but the entirety of the media keeps focusing on the guys on the ground level and never the elites. Why? Same reason as always. The people who broke into the building were poor and middle class, and yes, a couple of rich people, but mainly middle class, okay? The people who actually orchestrated the coup are a core part of the elite in Washington. And they will never, ever have consequences for the elite, and they don't have consequences today either. Jeff.
You know what's interesting about the whole discussion around insurrection is how the Republicans are now calling leaks from the SCOTUS ruling. That's the real insurrection, guys. Don't forget the Green Bay, especially forget the Green Bay sweep. Maybe we'll focus a little bit on the guys on the ground, even though we still say that they're just tourists and they're just people, or secret Antifa or secret FBI or whatever conspiracy theory you want to come up this week, right? We're gonna focus on that, and we're just gonna completely ignore the people that were at the top that were planning the whole thing. You're right. It is an insurrection. It is it was an attempt at a soft coup. A way to try to reinstall Donald Trump as president illegally. And I'm really concerned at how close they got. They had the fake electors. They caught them using fake documentation that they even had the official state seals on some of that paperwork. I believe it was either in Arizona or Michigan that had actual official seals, and they're like, hey, you can't do that.
No, Jeff is right again. I'm sorry, I got to jump in. Those guys who did the signatures on the fake documents, they should all be going to jail for at least 20 years. That was an actual, honest to goodness insurrection. Like, we're gonna take the real electors, burn them, throw them in the garbage. That's a fascist takeover. We know they're fake, we know that. But hey, that implicates the elites, so the system is never, ever going to punish anyone who's rich.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people seeing this news break today probably came away with it thinking, well, that's it, it's done. And it might well be done, but it's not quite done yet, because although the administrative law judge, Charles Boudreaux, did say that she's qualified, his findings will now be submitted to Brad Raffensperger. In the end, it will be Brad Raffensperger who will make this decision. And then there will be a period of about 10 days in which there can be appeals filed. And that is gonna be the interesting part, because the fact that he had been involved early on saying that she wasn't qualified makes it seem as if, well, if it is gonna be up to him, then he could still just unilaterally say that she's not allowed to run. But he also has been working ever since the beginning of last year to get back in the good graces of the Republicans after, in the wake of November of the 2020 election, the Republicans trying to pillory him, almost literally. There were death threats against him and against his wife. And that shook him to his core. And then a couple months later, he decided he still wanted to be a Republican, so he's gonna start sucking up to Trump. And if he bans her from running, that's it. They'll never accept him again. So I don't know, do you think there's any chance? It's up to him, he could do it.
Well, look, Ratzenberger is very, very right wing. So having said that, he did stand up to Trump. I mean, of all the sniveling little betas like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and all those guys, at least Ratzenberger was a man and said, no, I'm not gonna cheat on your behalf. No, you didn't win the election. Yes, we all recounted 3 times, you knucklehead. And no, we're not gonna cheat for you. So if anybody has apparently the inner strength to say, no, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you clearly committed insurrection, it's right there. You're considering martial law to overturn the American government, you're banned. He could, but yes, in Republican circles, there would be hell to pay.
I mean, that's a really good question. I don't really know the answer on this one. He could be a coward, you're right. He has stood up to Trump. He has stood up to some of the election disinformation. But at the end of the day, it comes down to whether or not Brad Raffensperger wants to remain in power and who will keep him in power, right? And so I think that's the big calculation that we need to look at is what are Republicans in his district that are going to vote for him? How are they going to react to this?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that it's probably not going to be a good thing for him and his power if he bans Marjorie Taylor Greene. So again, I think we need to watch that pretty closely.
Yeah, I think it's pretty unlikely, to very unlikely, especially given this ruling. But it's not impossible. And remember, there's one last factor here. Trump is trying to get rid of the governor of Georgia that also halfway stood up to him, Kemp. And he's backing David Perdue, the former senator, in a primary against him. And Kemp is winning by 35 points. So Raffensperger might look at that and go, oh, big bad Trump. You backed, you wanted to make sure Kemp lost, and he's crushing his election.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't have to worry about you too much. That's how it's going down in Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see. Look, if Raffensperger says no, she can proceed, nothing changes, it's the status quo. He could rock the world by saying, no, I disagree with the administrative judge. I don't care what the parliamentarian says, that was insurrection. And then we would have an interesting moment in American politics. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.